Just by something jumping around, you know.
Why did you feel you had to change your name?
Well, I think you have an identity of you, and it's you.
Bob Dylan is celebrated as the quiet poet of American music, the man who turned folk into fire. But the truth is far darker. At 84, he finally exposed 6 bands he grew to despise after private insults, stolen ideas, and one vicious moment that turned admiration into fury. And the most shocking part, some of these wars began with a single careless sentence. Brace yourself because what happened to him is almost impossible to believe. Number 1, the Beatles. The band Dylan never forgave. Bob Dylan and the Beatles were never supposed to be enemies. When they first met at the Delmonico Hotel in New York City on August 28, 1964, the world believed they had formed an artistic brotherhood. Dylan introduced them to marijuana. They introduced him to the scale of global fame. But beneath the public smiles, something darker was forming. By 1965, Dylan began noticing how quickly the Beatles were absorbing his lyrical style. Songs like "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away" sounded uncannily Dylan-esque. While critics cheered the transition, Dylan felt something else, an uneasiness that the Beatles were being praised for a sound he created through blood and breakdown. Then came the breaking point. When Paul McCartney's "Yesterday" became a global phenomenon in 1965, interviewers repeatedly asked Dylan for his thoughts. His response was a surgical strike. "If you go into the Library of Congress, you'll find a lot better. There are millions of songs like "Yesterday" written in Tin Pan Alley." This wasn't just criticism. It was Dylan declaring the song structurally unoriginal, a polished imitation rather than real emotional sacrifice. From that moment, tensions rose quickly. John Lennon, already insecure about his place next to McCartney, saw Dylan's comment as an attack on the band's artistic legitimacy. Lennon retaliated in his own way, privately mocking Dylan by recording a cruel parody of Dylan's vocal style. When Dylan heard it, he was reportedly humiliated. The rivalry intensified during the 1966 tours as journalists pushed the narrative of Dylan versus Beatles, who is the real poet of a generation. Dylan hated the comparison. Lennon hated that Dylan hated it. Both men began pulling away. Did Dylan truly hate the Beatles? Maybe yes, maybe no. And you can see they're tense in every moment now. Number 2, the Joni Mitchell camp, the collective that humiliated him. Joni Mitchell didn't just criticize Bob Dylan, she humiliated him. Their clash wasn't born from competition or ego. It exploded from a single interview in 2010 when Mitchell looked straight into the camera and delivered the most brutal line ever aimed at Dylan by another artist. "Bob is a fake. Everything about Bob is deception." That sentence detonated like a bomb. Dylan had endured critics, journalists, parodies, but never a peer accusing him of being a fraud at the core of his identity. Mitchell claimed his persona was invented, his voice was affected, and his myth was built on borrowed styles. And she didn't stop there. She later mocked his singing voice on television, imitating him in a nasal caricature that had the audience laughing. Dylan reportedly told close friends he considered Mitchell's words a personal attack, not an opinion. Their history made the betrayal sting even more. In the 70s, they had admired each other from afar. Mitchell once spoke warmly of Dylan's songwriting courage, but over the years, resentment grew. Mitchell believed Dylan received too much credit for sounds she felt other artists pioneered. Dylan, in turn, saw her criticisms as envy dressed up as honesty. To this day, they've never reconciled. Their feud remains one of the most shocking riffs in modern music. Number 3, the Neil Young camp. The rival faction Dylan resented. Why did Bob Dylan's relationship with Neil Young collapse the moment Young started calling himself the voice of a generation? That single ambition was enough to ignite one of folk rock's coldest rivalries. The tension first took shape in the mid-1970s when Young's politically charged songs like "Ohio" and "Southern Man" thrust him into the spotlight as the new conscience of American music. Critics began comparing him directly to Dylan, sometimes even calling Young a sharper, more honest version of Bob. Dylan hated that label. He had earned his reputation through years of chaos, reinvention, and the burden of unwanted heroism. To him, Young was skipping the suffering and claiming the reward. In 1980, during a backstage conversation in Santa Monica, Neil Young reportedly said he never understood why people treated Dylan like an untouchable prophet. The comment spread quickly. Dylan, hearing it secondhand, fired back in an interview. People today mistake volume for truth. Everyone knew he meant Young's aggressive political style. The feud intensified when Young released Trans in 1982, a bold electronic experiment. Dylan mocked it publicly, dismissing the record as not music, just confusion. It was a direct blow to Young's artistic ego, especially coming from someone Young admired in his early career. Young retaliated on stage during a concert in Toronto 1983. He performed a distorted, chaotic version of Blowing in the Wind, bending the melody until it was unrecognizable. Fans laughed. Dylan did not. According to a crew member, Dylan heard about the performance and muttered, "He wants a fight." The rivalry simmered for decades. At award shows, they barely acknowledged each other. At tribute concerts, they stood on opposite sides of the stage. Their rare meetings were described as polite but icy. Despite their shared brilliance, both men were too stubborn, too protective of their artistic identities. Neil Young didn't steal Dylan's crown, but he reached for it loudly enough that Dylan never forgave him. Number 4, the Eric Clapton camp, the blues group he clashed with. Eric Clapton and Bob Dylan didn't just disagree. They collided over something sacred. Who had the right to claim the blues? The clash began in the early 1970s when Clapton, newly crowned god by British rock fans, hinted in an interview that Dylan didn't truly understand the roots of the music he borrowed. To Dylan, this wasn't criticism. It was an insult aimed straight at his foundation. The first sparks flew at a recording session in 1975 for a mutual friend's project in Los Angeles. Witnesses said Clapton abruptly cut off a guitar solo Dylan had requested, telling the producer, "This is my territory." Dylan froze. No one had ever spoken to him like that in a studio. He walked out moments later, leaving his harmonica on the chair as a sign he wasn't coming back. By 1985, the hostility had grown public. When a journalist asked Dylan about white musicians popularizing blues, his answer was a razor blade. "Some people play the blues, others steal it." Everyone understood who others referred to. Clapton was furious, complaining privately that Dylan was acting like a gatekeeper of a genre neither of them created. The feud intensified during Live Aid rehearsals in London, 1985. Clapton reportedly made a sarcastic comment about Dylan's voice, saying it would sound better through a wall. Dylan later told a friend, he thinks skill is soul. That single sentence revealed everything. Dylan believed Clapton cared more about technique than truth, while Clapton believed Dylan hid behind myth rather than musicianship. Their paths crossed again in 1999 at a tribute event in New York. Organizers noticed Clapton avoided eye contact with Dylan the entire evening. When someone suggested they perform together, Clapton refused without explanation. Dylan didn't push. He simply nodded as if the answer had been clear for decades. To this day, the rift has never fully closed. Their mutual respect as icons exists, but their personal chemistry is ice cold. Number 5, the Byrds, the cover band that crossed the line. Few things angered Bob Dylan more than seeing his work reshaped into something he didn't recognize. Yet that is exactly what the Byrds did. The moment Dylan heard their 1965 version of Mr. Tambourine Man, he reportedly stared at the radio and muttered, "What is this?" The band had cut his sprawling poetic composition down to a 2-minute pop single. To Dylan, it wasn't an adaptation. It was vandalism. Roger McGuinn, the group's leader, defended the arrangement proudly. He claimed the Byrds had made it listenable. That comment struck Dylan like a slap. His songs were meant to be experienced, not sanitized. He already disliked the idea of his lyrics being trimmed. Hearing McGuinn imply they needed trimming made the resentment boil. Their first face-to-face clash happened in New York, late 1965, after the Byrds' version topped the charts. McGuinn approached Dylan backstage, expecting praise. Instead, Dylan looked him in the eye and said quietly, "You ruined my song." The words were simple but devastating. McGuinn later admitted he didn't know how to respond. The feud deepened when the Byrds continued releasing Dylan covers. "All I Really Want to Do," "My Back Pages," "Chimes of Freedom." Each time Dylan felt they were smoothing the edges, removing the grit. turning his raw, emotional truth into radio-friendly material. He began refusing invitations to appear with them on stage, worried people would assume he approved of what they were doing. By 1967, tensions were widely known in the folk rock community. Musicians joked that Dylan kept a mental blacklist with the Byrds at the top. McGinn tried to bridge the gap once during a session in Los Angeles, but Dylan remained distant, answering him with short, clipped sentences. One witness recalled, "Bob looked at Roger like he was a stranger holding his diary." Ironically, the Byrds helped introduce Dylan's songwriting to millions, but that only made the betrayal feel deeper. Dylan didn't want fame through distortion. He wanted the truth of his music intact. So which of these 6 feuds shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe for more untold stories from music's darkest rivalries.